a reopened world. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about what are the things we need to focus on post-COVID and be very focused. And then there's a lot more information in this presentation that we may or may not have time to get through, which will be really focused on other sort of longer term things you should be thinking about. But we're going to start with what's going on right now. So costs in the family office world are getting reassessed and reprioritized. There's a lot more complexity going on now because we have to not, this particular crash was not a financial crash, it was a health crash, as Peter mentioned. So there's a lot of issues we'll discuss about the health issues of this thing. And then the time that people are going to need to devote is going to be even greater. And I urge all the family offices on the line, this is the time to really do some heavy thinking and reassessing your family office and your family business because you have a little time right now being in lockdown. It's a good use of your time right now and it will pay great dividends no matter where you decide to invest going forward. Okay, so those of you on the line, if there are some who don't know about the family offices, but basically pre-COVID, this was sort of what you would generally hear me talking about. 80% of their families losing wealth over 3 generations, preparing the heirs to take over the businesses, why the family office is such an important way to do that, technology and information being very important, diversity in the family, global activity, and then deal flow and co-investment, as Peter mentioned, among the family office crowd. This was the things we were very focused on pre-COVID. Now, COVID happened. Now what? We have to look at some new priorities. Rather than talking about losing wealth in 3 generations, we need to talk about the fact that we could lose all our wealth in this generation. That's a scary thing to say, but it's actually something we have to wake up and look at because of this pandemic. This is not the last pandemic. Melinda Gates was in I think the journal talking about this. This is the first in a series of pandemics. You now have to train these kids not only about taking over your fortune, but how to survive a pandemic, how to deal in a world where we might have civil unrest and hunger and famine and all kinds of crazy things happening that we really, made fun of the preppers about, but suddenly these things are becoming much more possible. The family office needs to sharpen up what it's doing and be much more focused to be able to handle this new world. Technology and virtual communication and virtual family offices, which are something that I have been creating for families for the last 20 years, literally, since 2001, so it'll be 20 years next year, on 5 continents. This is going to become no longer sort of an option. It's just going to be the way that we do things. And for those of you who have businesses or real estate, access to medical supplies and things like gowns, gloves, tests, thermometers, air sanitizers for killing viruses, etc. These things are suddenly got to be top of mind if you want to successfully reopen your business and not be sued by employees who get sick. So the family office, the single family office or the virtual family office, I now think it's much more. In fact, I'm writing a book which will be out in about 2 weeks where I'm even changing what I call it. So more to come on that. I'll be telling you soon. It's really got to be driven by a family's vision to succeed over multiple generations, but ready to face rolling pandemics. And if you think of it that way, it's going to change all of your priorities immediately. Okay, so for those of you who don't know me, this is what I mean when I talk about family office. I believe all of these activities fall under a purview, ideally, of a family office. So it's not only all the investment stuff that we love and we talk about, it's also taxes, operational planning, estates, trust, philanthropy. But over here, these other things suddenly have jumped up, particularly healthcare and security. Family communication, educating the next generation, making the successful generational transfers. None of that has gone away. Understanding the history so we can operate better in the future. None of that has gone away. However, this pandemic needs to sharpen where we focus our attention. So again, this is just a little diagram to catch those of you up who haven't heard me speak before. This is what I mean by a family office. So you have an entity here, a single or virtual family office sort of brain. You have an external, I recommend external independent consolidated reporting system into which all the asset managers or let's say funds or real estate investments report into. All your advisors have access at the level that they're supposed to have. Other experts are being coordinated by this family office, and then all of that is being given to the family members and the family heads or the council, however you're running your family office, giving them information to make decisions. So really the family head can start acting like a CEO instead of like, you know, a head of operations. And that you really, the family office or the virtual family office is sort of massaging all this information, but always driven by the vision created by the family governance and family constitution. Okay, so why do we need to assess the family office right now? Well, A, we're all home, so we actually have time to do this. But this change is very global. Peter articulated very well a lot of the trends that we've seen being accelerated, but he didn't really focus on some of the disturbing things that could happen in the future and that have happened. Massive deaths, a virus that is now, they're now discovering, this hasn't been talked about here, but it's certainly been in all the papers, and I've been in touch with a lot of the research scientists through my families. People that thought they had very mild versions of COVID are developing massive strokes and dying at a young age. So COVID is much more deadly than we thought. It may actually be an escape bioweapon. We don't know. It could be that it was a virus that was being developed by multiple governments in Wuhan and it just escaped, or God only knows was released. We don't know. But certainly if it wasn't, now these kinds of things can be engineered and could be released. So families really need to look at the fact that there's silent and deadly killers out there, and that the governments of the world were able to actually effectively shut down the entire planet. It didn't matter if you had a private plane. You couldn't land it in an airport. If you didn't move quick enough, you couldn't get to your remote retreat. If your remote retreat didn't have good internet access or a backup generators or water and everything already there, you were out of luck. So those of us, and myself included, who weren't massive preppers, were caught a bit flat-footed, and most families I know were caught flat-footed during this pandemic. So we need to look at what didn't work and what were we caught flat-footed with during this pandemic, both in our businesses and for the family office, and for a lot of people, their cash levels. So that did they have enough cash around to actually make it through this, and what happened because they were getting a little too aggressive on leverage, thinking that the world was going to be great. We need to look at the technology. A lot of family offices have very backward technology, or it's not really as good as it needs to be. It's not ready for people to move on a dime to just total remote functioning in a secure manner. That has to change. And a lot of the family office professionals are in their 60s, 70s, and are getting ready to retire, but they aren't necessarily grooming those successors in their 40s, let's say, who are tech savvy and can help make this transition. That has to move up on a priority. You can't be caught flat-footed. As the world is changing now, you really need to bring up that next generation of family office professional leadership and family leadership. And we need to look at the budgets and where are we going to actually spend money to be safe. Because if there's no family, we don't need family office. If people are dying, we're not going to worry about investing. Okay, so, you know, I'm sorry I sound a little bit grim, but I really want to wake people up. I'm generally, as most of you who know me, a very optimistic person, and I believe humans are very resilient. But I really think we have to take this seriously as a pause moment to reevaluate what we're doing. So when we do an analysis, when I do this with a family, and you can do this on your own, is you first analyze your overall functioning now, assess and grade each function that's going on, really process map every single thing that's being done for you, for the family office, the investments, and how that relates to the businesses, by the way. So those all three have to come together and mesh properly. And then you're going to need a new business plan and probably a new budget and a different set of financial priorities in order to fill the gaps that you're going to discover in your operations if you assess them now while we're all on pause. Okay, so again, step one, you're going to do a strategic plan. After that, once you've done your assessment, you're going to make sure that governance is up to snuff with this new reality we're facing. The kids are getting properly prepared. There's decision making. If somebody suddenly got a virus and died, who's going to take over? All of this is really tight now. There's a strategic business plan. There's an understanding of why we might be keeping higher cash amounts, or as Peter mentioned, certainly higher levels of inventory, or changing the supply chains in our businesses, and why that might be a little bit more expensive, but that's okay. Then we're going to have an operational plan about how we're going to actually operationalize all this. And again, much of this now is going outsourced. Family offices are becoming much more virtual, so there's a group of external suppliers who are much more cost effective that work together as a team remotely. This is, you know, I started doing this in 2001 for families, and now it's really becoming the standard. We're all going in that direction. It's being accelerated by this stay-at-home time. but that doesn't mean you don't have to have strong controls and procedures and technology to make sure that everybody's safe. Then we got to do a restructuring if required, harden the defenses of the family office, and now we're ready when the next wave hits. Okay, so this is basically, you know, information that you can read about more if you're interested in benchmarking and interested in how deep you can go into doing this type of assessment. But I really want to focus on these 4 things here during our brief time together. And if anybody wants more, feel free to email me or call me and I can talk to you more about your personal situation. So as I said, we're going to talk about these 4 things, and there's a lot more in this presentation that you'll get as a takeaway to think about and do your own checklist and do your own assessment. So first, as I said, number 1 is assessing your COVID responses. You actually need to sit down and look at, for your businesses and for your family office and your family, how prepared were you? Were you able to move to a safe location? Did you know where everybody was? Do you have everybody's medical and dental records? Did you have multiple internet redundancies, et cetera, like that? You know, what worked, what didn't work? Were you over-invested in sectors that just collapsed? Were you not diversified enough? Did you not have enough cash? Were you over-levered? Were you too much in love with one particular sector? So all of this, you've got to be brutally honest with yourselves, because that's the only way we improve, and this is the time to do it. Everybody's home. This is a great time to really take a hard look at how you functioned over the last couple of months. Then we're going to talk about something very specific, which is actually, I'm getting a lot of calls about, and that is medical supplies. If you own a business, any kind of business, can that business reopen safely? Medical PPE right now is the wild, wild west. I'll talk a little bit more about that because I'm involved with that on behalf of some of my clients, and I'm actually personally opening with a medical doctor in California, a private medical supply market for families and family businesses. So anybody who's interested and needs supplies can talk to me about that. But this is the Wild West, and it's not so easy with the governments of the world actually competing with each other, sending planes and sending cash to pick up and scoop up any supplies they can find anywhere in the world, all the governments of the world, for family-owned businesses or even corporations to get their hands on all the supplies they need to make their employees safe. So, because remember, these employees will sue you if they catch COVID-19 in the office, or they can claim they will. They'll at least try. There's going to be a lot of lawsuits about this, I believe. Then we're going to talk a little bit about really looking at your physical locations. We need to get very nitty-gritty here. I'm talking about, where were you? Where was the family? Where was the family office? Did you actually have disaster plans that included a pandemic? And if not, are you ready to create one now? Do you have people to help you create that? For example, I work a lot with Kroll, which is the top security firm in the world, and they're very good at this kind of thing. You know, all of your communications technology, multiple internet connections, sat phones. If you're out in Wyoming somewhere, did you have a good cell tower? Do you have a generator to run it? Do you have water? We saw the pushback that happened when the wealthy people suddenly showed up in Wyoming or in the islands, and everybody said, get out of here. So fixing that, so next time you're welcome in that community and not being told to go home and not being allowed to enter that community. There was an article in the paper that said, you know, they're coming for our food. And seriously, looking at who's under your umbrella of responsibility in terms of employees or the charities that you support, physically being ready to support them so that when the next thing hits, you're ready to help. Are your offices, if you're a multinational family, do you have your offices in the right countries? Did you run into these supply chain issues where suddenly you can't get things from China, or you had a just-in-time supply chain and now you don't have what you need where you need it? Really re-examining where is your cash, where's your family members, and how to organize all this is critical at this time. And then governance. A lot of people kind of poo-poo family governance and having a family council and having all those documents and family constitutions and think that's such a waste of time. But actually, my experience through this pandemic with the families that I know, those that had a good governance plan, when panic hits, our brain goes into that amygdala, right? Our brain goes into fight or flight or freeze. But when we have a set of decision-making tools that were agreed upon within the family before something like this emergency hit, those families were much more equipped. They just rolled into action. They had terrific disaster planning was ready. They knew who was 1, 2, and 3 on the phone change. They knew where everybody was. All the cars had gas. People quickly moved to the right locations, etc. There's a great thing that I recommend, and again, I work with people like Kroll to help create this for families, is to have literally your own private watchtower of economic data, health data, etc. to be following. You can purchase these things from people like Kroll, who will send you monthly, privately structured watchtowers of economic indicators, political unrest, viruses, etc. There were people that moving their family and moving things around in February. And there were a lot more people that didn't start to move until March 15th. The people that moved in February were in much better places, and their businesses were much more prepared than the people that tried to start waking up and dealing with reality March 15th. It's just the way our brains work as humans. We tend to at first deny reality and hope it's going to go away, and then we start to act. So if we have plans in place, we're much more likely to let that automatic plan take over the minute there's some sort of a crisis going on. So as I mentioned, one of the things that I'm encountering with my families is that they don't have medical PPE. So they don't have masks for their employees. They don't have hand sanitizer. They don't know how to clean the air in the offices. They don't have air purifiers. They don't have tests, COVID tests, or swabs, or even the transport medium to swab the employees and then get the test done, because clearly the governments aren't testing enough and people want tests. And if you have employees, you don't want them suing you because they got sick in your workplace. They will do that. So, and your insurance is not going to cover it. It's just not going to happen. So the companies that I know that are planning for reopening, whether they're in real estate or they're in operating businesses, this is something that they're having a lot of trouble competing with the US government, the Canadian government, et cetera, trying to get their hands on supplies. So for that, they're encountering price gouging. I've talked to people at the University of Washington, for example, who ordered several million test kits from China. They arrived and all the transport medium was contaminated, and they had to try to get into a lawsuit and get their money back. Another guy ordered 1 million masks for his companies, and the masks arrived from China with no strings on the back. So, and now, if anything's coming in large quantities from Asia, for example, literally FEMA and the government is just grabbing it at the border and saying, sorry, it's for the government. You can't have it. So it's very important to identify US and Canadian and NAFTA kind of based suppliers of products to give to your family company so that you can get open. And for this reason, I'm actually am opening this today on my birthday, in fact, with Dr. Queen Marmish, a private medical supply marketplace. So anybody who needs large quantities, unfortunately, these are not like 10 or 20 or 30, but if you need 100,000 or 50,000 or 25,000 of something, contact me, and we are vetting everybody. We vet all the suppliers. We have distribution agreements, for example, with US family-owned companies that make medical supplies that want to supply into a private trusted market. So anybody that either knows companies that have medical supplies like that, for example, we have a deal with Homedics that are creating terrific products for our people. Let me know if you know of companies that would like to join us as suppliers to our marketplace, and then if your family businesses need this, we can help get medical supplies to you. So the rest of these pages, I want to pause just for a moment, Marty. Are there any questions that people have right now before I run through this very quickly in terms of what you should be assessing? And then we'll talk a little bit about investing in the last 5 minutes.
Carol, I actually had a couple of questions about location of family offices. I mean, I realize that many European family offices, are in Paris or Italy or even London, and they've all had less than stellar responses to this. Yep. Any thoughts on relocation or what they're thinking about, how to be better prepared?
Yes, I think, as I mentioned, a lot of family offices are realizing physically locating all your employees in one place is great, but they have to have home backup for sure. They have to be able to access everything they did in the office online at home. So you have to have a paperless office, but it has to be completely secure. So you need a lot of technology to make that happen. If your employees, and you may, for your key employees, want to move them with you out. Let's say you have a big chateau somewhere outside of Paris. Maybe some of them and their families are going to come because it's a 25-bedroom place, and maybe you need a few of those people there with you in the house. This is true even for household staff. There are people that, you know, their maid suddenly couldn't get into their house. So they needed to bring that household staff and make it an in-house staff. So yes, people are reassessing physically where their staff is going to be. And then when, not if, when the next crisis hits, what are they going to do next time? So getting a great technology consultant and security consultant in there to reorganize tech, reorganize what people can do at home, what they can access remotely. Yes, we're all worried about that. We don't want anybody to be able to download things and share our information all over the place. But if Paris or London or New York is shut and all your family documents are only on local servers, what are you going to do? It doesn't work anymore. The world has changed. And so we have to be as smart as we can. And that's why I'm coming out with a new book in the next week or two about this, and more to come. I'm sure Marty can tell everybody about it when it's out. But yes, going more virtual, having, you know, outsourced things like third party. I'm very strong, very much passionate about external consolidated reporting from a third party who's not one of your managers, like PCR, Private Client Resources, or Adapar. There's others in Europe and Asia. So that at least all, you know, those people are doing nothing but consolidating trillions of dollars of data. They don't really care about your little $100 million or $1 billion. They've got so many clients. You don't have to worry about that. And they will make sure that all your data is consolidated and available independent of either brokers that may close down or your own staff. So having your information available so that you can make decisions on your publicly traded assets, or even where your cash is, or how your banks are doing, all that is critical. So if you've not gone the step of getting independent consolidated reporting, that's got to be one of your top priorities. And again, then literally things like backup internet at home. What if your internet went down? Do you have generators if you're moving to remote locations? Do you have enough gasoline? Do you have gasoline storage on your property? Things that we never thought about before, but we actually have to all become preppers, basically, to be able to get this, to make it through the next time, because the next one could be a lot worse.
Great. And another question, Carol, that came down the pike is, so, you know, what do you think about venture investing, or, you know, high risk illiquid asset investing? I mean, there's going to be some repricing. I think we're seeing several firms that have had this problem. I think Josh will address it as well, but any thoughts about that? You know,
yeah, I mean, I think it depends on in what industries, and I think people will be reprioritizing where they invest money. As Peter very well discussed for us previously, you know, hotels may not be the best place to go unless you're a deep value investor and you think your hotels will be special and you have some special plans to refit them and be able to use them in different ways, for example. And maybe, I agree with him, industrial and last mile warehousing is a great area for investing. If you don't have an external chief investment officer, you should. Okay, everybody who's got a single family office out there, I perform this function for people, but it doesn't have to be me, but you really need a true CFO. CFO to look at all your expenses and budgeting, and a CIO, two different people, accountant and investment person that are independent, only paid by you, to look at your asset allocation. Because how much you should be doing in venture, for example, or seed, where you can get great bargains, and because a lot of people are going to be afraid and not touch it. So this could be a great time to get into these areas. You'll get much better pricing. However, first, before you make those decisions, you need to understand your budgets. You need to have done your reassessment of where you need to spend money and have a really strong idea of how much money you can put into liquids now. It may have changed because let's say your technology is very backwards. Let's say you don't have great security and you've got to go hire Kroll. It's going to cost you a couple $100,000 a year to do that. Let's say you don't have consolidated reporting. You need that first. So getting your infrastructure right at this point and ready to handle the new world, to me, happens first. And understanding, if you're not a fan of budgeting, getting somebody to do either your accounting firm or a CFO. You can also have an external CFO to really crack down on budgeting and understanding where you're spending your money. Then you know how much you can invest. I recommend people have 2 to 3 years worth of living expenses and carrying costs for their businesses and their family office before they touch anything to invest. Because we could go through a very protracted downturn and people get caught out when they don't have enough cash. And I've seen that with big families that have huge, I'm talking billions of dollars, but they're super illiquid right now. And they can't even take advantage of these great opportunities because they're too over invested. So to answer that question, yes, I'm generally a fan of venture. I'm generally a fan of seed. My families generally do directs and not funds. However, budget first and make sure all these priorities that I'm talking about here are done first. Because there's, again, making money, but people are dying in your family is not going to make any sense. Let's get real about what our first priority has to be, which is physical safety and health preparedness for the family and the employee.
Carol, we have about 5 minutes.
Yeah. Okay, great. So the rest of these pages we don't have time to talk about, but basically I'm just going to flip through them and tell you what's here. You can read it at your leisure. So you're going to look at all your structures, your organization, your physical locations, again, the Constitution, having a way to make decisions so that when the disaster strikes, I even like a junior constitution for the kids. When disaster strikes, you're ready to act as a group. You've already figured out how you make decisions, okay? Having your visions, mission statement, all this stuff is still important, but it may have shifted a bit. You might want to revisit it now that we're living in this different type of a world. Again, cost, we just talked about that. Really assessing what has to be prioritizing cost for everybody to be safe. Okay, human resources, do you have the right staff? Can they work remotely? Are they like old school, they can't handle that? Because they're going to have to be able to do that in the future. Governance and succession planning, again, we didn't have time on this webinar, but now we got to prepare the kids for a different world. There's additional things we have to train them in. Next generation services, again, whether it's special needs, super bright kids, or just general financial knowledge. All this, you've really got to talk to your kids. You got to get them involved. They're well aware of what's happening, and they need to be involved at a younger age. 10 to 13 years old, start really involving them. Technology, we just talked about. I really like Kroll to do your technology security assessment. I think they're great. The US government uses them, so I recommend them. Investment process, having that independent CIO, making sure that all the fees are correct, that you're looking at your deals in the context of an overall asset allocation and costs, as we just mentioned. And definitely other family offices are a great place. People like Peter and Josh, who's going to speak next, are great ways to find good partners to invest with. I love working with other families and almost exclusively do. Document storage, investment reporting, we just talked about. Taxes, etc. There's going to be a lot of new tax things coming out of this. We don't have time to talk about it, but there's lots of great people like Withers or Handler Thayer who can help you with tax issues. Administrative and accounting, getting a lot tighter in your budgeting, cash flow management, and succession planning for not only the family, but the employees who are taking care of you. This new really having a tight disaster recovery. What about philanthropy? Are you going to change your priorities post-COVID? We don't have time to talk about that. Something to think about. Social impact is still critical. In fact, I believe a lot of the social impact companies are going to have the best returns long-term, because social impact will be a big thing going forward. Again, household objects, security of all these things. You know, you couldn't get to all these houses. People couldn't get there. The valuable objects, the boats, the planes, we got to talk about those at some point. Healthcare for the families, medical concierge supplies. And then, you know, once you do this, give yourself an A, B, or C for each of these processes. Make a new plan, how you want to go forward, and make some performance metrics about keeping track every year about how you're doing and keeping your staff on track. So, you know, when I do it, I kind of look at each project and I'll give you a flat fee that's paid 100% in advance, but a lot of this you can do yourself if you're interested. And so that's really what I had to share with you. Anybody who's interested in learning more, has questions, or wants resources, feel free to ask me. And then in terms of investing, I also act as the external CIO for several single family offices. Very briefly, we're keeping our powder dry still. We still like, you know, in terms of sectors, healthcare and technology. Totally agree with Peter about last mile warehousing and industrial as a good real estate sectors. Love seed, we're looking at a lot of biotech and in it, you know, I think healthcare and technology are going to continue to be the winning sectors longer term. And definitely I agree with all the trends that Peter identified. I think he did a great job on that, and I'm looking forward to what Josh has to say. So I have 2 more minutes for questions.
A couple of quick questions, Carol. So people were asking about remote locations that are kind of self-sustaining off the grid. Do you see any family offices moving towards that?
Absolutely. And not only that, a lot of cool vault storage, you know, actually moving a lot of these valuables out of your homes and into vaults unless you're really going to be in that house. So yeah, people are, there's a guy, Paul Hutchinson, who has a vault company that I can hook people up with.
Right. And I guess that, you had talked a lot about, priorities and things like that. But really, I mean, to me, what you're talking about is fundamentals, right? I mean, it's like you're having a reset, go back to fundamentals, right?
Yeah, I mean, you basically have to go back to these five. If you just look at these four things right now, that'll get you started. I mean, this is a perfect time to say, grade yourself. How did we do in the first 4 months of 2020 when this hit? And what would we have done different if we knew this was coming, both for the family office, and the businesses? And then what do we want to do better next time? What if this virus reflares up by the fall? Are we going to be ready then? Reprioritizing where you have to focus. This is the time to do it. You're stuck at home. It's the perfect time to do this work.
Great. And Carol, after you finish presenting, can you just get on the chat and just give the names of the several vendors that you mentioned?
Sure, absolutely. I'll do it right now.
Know what the tech firms are, et cetera. So
exactly. I'll be happy to do that. And again, anybody can email me, Carol@Pepper International. I have it on the chat there. If you have specific questions or you're interested in thinking about how you need to do this for yourself, it's really, do it. Just do it. You're going to be glad you did it. This is no time to fool around. Okay, take your family office to the next level.
Great. So we're going to move to Josh Roach, but just 1 second before we move on with Josh. So for our next event,